So keep in mind, this is the soft skills class. If any of you are interested in the technical class that is going to be going on, I can't remember the name of it. That's actually on the 3rd floor, back where the lunch area was. Yeah, I'm going to be doing boring stuff. Yeah, just go hit that technical class. Yeah, do your thing. Better you walk out on me now. Fantastic. All right, folks, I am going to get started. What makes a great class? Microsoft training is being delivered in classrooms all over the world, even as we speak. Almost every single day, there's a different class going on. There's multiple classes going on. Do you think that everybody in these classrooms are having the same experience? There are some instructors that I've seen who think their only obligation is to walk into a classroom, teach, lecture, and then leave without giving any thought to the audience that they're teaching. Even really, really good instructors get complacent from time to time. The problem with this is that when we forget about our audience, what separates us from the thousands of instructional videos anybody can find online for free? Students want interaction. Students pay for interaction. They want to feel special. They want to have their questions answered. Over the next hour, I'm going to share some insights, observations, and techniques that I've learned along the way that will help you engage your students a little bit better, create more meaningful relationships, make your class time more meaningful, and bring pride and purpose back to something you do almost every day. My name is Seth Crespo, and this is Dynamic Delivery. I need music, right? So, first of all, I want to thank our sponsors for making the summit possible. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Microsoft. I was a young soldier returning home to New York City in the early 90s, and all I wanted to do was get a job as a computer technician. My GI Bill didn't cover vocational training, and if it wasn't for the Microsoft Student Loan Program at the time, I definitely wouldn't be standing here in front of you. So thank you for our sponsors, and a very special thank you for Microsoft for making my life happen. And before I cry, let's move on to the next slide. A little bit about me. I've been in the technology industry for approximately 20 years. I've been in MCT since 2008, and during that time, I've worked for a very large franchise organization based out of New York City. I had the opportunity to do traditional instructor-led training, on-site training where we traveled to different customers and we did on-site delivery, and also virtual training that gave me exposure to the rest of the nation. In a very, very short period of time, I ended up teaching thousands of students, mostly in applications. It was during that time that I was preparing to take over for the exiting training manager for this franchise organization, and I started to think about what I could do for new MCTs. How would I teach them? How would I lead them in the techniques that I've developed to maintain high survey scores and really good student retention, and also loyalty for the customers that bought training from my franchise organization. Unfortunately, that training position never happened, but this lecture is the product of the planning that I had going into this. About you, the audience for this particular lecture. Oops. The audience for this particular lecture is... Sorry about that. Is any new instructor or new MCT that is going to come into the industry and just needs an idea of how to get started. How many people are new MCTs within the last 6 months? Oh, one guy. Excellent, thank you. And the rest of you have been around for a while, right? Hopefully I don't bore you over the next hour. I believe that anybody can take away something from my lecture, even if it's just an idea of how we do things in the States, right? My disclaimer that I had up on the screen before that keeps disappearing is that I do not hold a degree in education, and I don't have any formal training in classroom management. Everything I'm about to tell you comes from my experiences in the classroom and are my opinions. There will be opposing opinions. There will be those of you who think that I left some things out of my presentation. At the very end of this lecture, I'm going to post my email address and my LinkedIn. I invite you to contact me and share some of your thoughts and ideas with me. It only makes me a better instructor. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the type of students that I've encountered over the past couple of years. I've kept some track of some of the demographics, and this is what it looks like. My slides aren't cooperating with me. There we go. So, as you can see here, there's a little variation in the type of people that I get. And I'm showing you this slide not to impress you, but to impress upon you that you can't pick who your students are, right? When you go into a classroom, anybody could walk in. And what's worse is it's going to be varied no matter what. These people are going to be bringing their baggage and their thoughts and ideas of what their class is going to be. They're going to bring their anxieties from the last time that they actually took a class. And they want a personalized experience, every single one of them. I'm showing you this to remind you that none of it matters. It doesn't matter who's in front of you, but what does matter is the motivation. Why are these students in front of you today? I believe we can break students down into 3 student types. We have the willing. These are students that paid out of pocket for their course, or they were sponsored by their company to actually arrive and take training. They may be taking on a new role or taking on new responsibilities. They may be updating their resume and skill sets. They want to be there and they need the knowledge that you have. The second group of people are the reluctant. These people are in your classroom because by memo, mandate, or security policy, they're forced to be in your classroom. Has anybody had people like this before? Oh yeah. They're pleasures to deal with, right? If you're not careful, they can actually subvert your classroom, right? They can actually make a complete mess of things. I'm going to give you a little bit of techniques later on to show you how we can deal with these particular students with a very, very soft touch. The very last group, the third group, is the desperate. Unfortunately, these people have been around all the time, but in the United States, especially for the last couple of years, this is a growing demographic. These are people who have lost their jobs or have had their positions eliminated. And now they find themselves way behind the power curve in an oversaturated market. The only way that they feel that they can get out there and get relevant work is to come to you and have you in an overnight session make them a subject matter expert. They're going to come and bring very high expectations to you. I'm going to show you how we can manage those expectations a little bit later on. So, as an instructor, what's the goal? Well, we need to create connections. We need to find a connection not to your classroom as a whole, but we need to find individual connections with people. Then we need to keep these students engaged, keep them on track, and make sure that we finish the class on time with everybody crossing the finish line at the same time. we need to make sure that when the students leave, they leave happy and satisfied, because let's face it, a happy student is a repeat customer. And we need to have more repeat customers if we're going to keep doing what we're doing, right? I said right? Yeah, exactly. So let's go through an instructor-led training course step by step as to what we need to do in order to create the illusion, at the very least, of a personal connection with the individuals in the class. First thing we got to do is we got to get there early, right? The last thing we want to be doing is dealing with crazy environmental issues when you're supposed to be teaching. You need to make sure that all your temperatures are good, that all your computers are up and running, that the proper version of the software is actually on your machines. As an applications instructor, I can't tell you how many times I've arrived at a training location, supposed to teach 2010, and there's 2007 on the machine, right? These are things that drive me crazy. You want to make sure that you manage all of these little issues before students arrive. Prepare yourself. Any crazy ritual that you do, you want to make sure you do it before students arrive. You hop around on one foot and howl at the moon. If that's what you got to do before you get your class started, make sure you do it before students get there. Student arrival. One of the pet peeves that I have, that I've seen all the time, especially in franchise organizations, if you've worked in a classroom environment, you always get to know other instructors, right? And there's always that bond that you have with those instructors. And the first thing in the morning always seems like the time to gossip, right? You want to get together, find out about the game last night, or how your manager did this, that, and the other, and who, made a big flub at, in one of their classrooms. This is something that should be avoided. You can definitely catch up with your instructors later on in the day. The morning time, I stress that one of the great ways that you can make connections with your students is waiting for them in the classroom and waiting for them to arrive. If this is their first time at your center, they're going to be a little bit confused. And quite frankly, where you work is your home. That's your work home. And you want to invite these people into your home and make them feel comfortable and special, right? As soon as a person walks in through the door, hi, yes, you're here for Excel 2010 Level 2? Fantastic, my name is Seth. Yours is Diane. Diane, come in, welcome. Please feel free to sit anywhere. Make sure that you can see the screen, right? If you get cold, don't sit in that seat because the vent is going to be blowing on you for the rest of the day. You got about 15 minutes before the class starts. Bathrooms are right around the corner, and if you need to get refreshments on the 3rd floor, we have coffee service and tea and soda. How long did that take, right? And now you've made a personal connection with this individual. You've made them feel comfortable. And now, if it's appropriate, you can chat with them. You can find out what kind of student they are. Are they the willing? Are they the desperate? Right? As more and more students come into the classroom, you're greeting them, you're seating them, and you're getting them ready. The next thing that you want to make sure to do is, as more and more students come in, nameplates and name tags. We all use these, right? Yeah? Raise your hand if you use them. If you're not using them, you're not creating a personal connection with the individual. I'm the kind of person that when I shake someone's hand and I get their name, the moment my hand breaks connection, I'll forget the person's name. And in a classroom, I don't want to say, yes, you with the brown shirt, or you with the purple, and you with the hair, right? You want to address people by their names, because that's the way you make personal connections with individuals. When a person hears their name spoken, it's the sweetest sound in the world. They feel as if you care about them, right? Doesn't matter if it's true or not, but they feel as if you care about them, and that's going to make that personal connection. As people come in, like I said, chat if appropriate, get to find out what their motivations are for being there. Then, Once you've got all the people in the room, you've handed out all your materials, you got everybody with their name tags or their name tents on their computers, the next thing that you need to do is you need to start that class on time. The worst thing you can do is disrespect a student's efforts for being there on time by waiting for people who didn't care enough to be there on time in the first place. Does that make sense? The willing students, the students that want to be there, will almost always be there early. And nothing will anger a willing student and make them turn on you when it comes time to fill out MTMs than if you start the class late. Because now you are waiting on somebody who isn't there and you're eating into their time. They want that class moving. They want to get the information as quickly as possible. So definitely make sure you start on time. What happens if anyone shows up late? Individual results may vary, right? It depends on where you are and what kind of relationship you have with your operations department or with your management. I will tell you that in New York City, one of the things that we said, one of the policies that we set was if a person came like 15 minutes late, 20 minutes late, it's no problem. You leave the door open, you go into your introduction. If somebody arrives at the door, just give them a smile, wave them in, and continue on with what you're doing. Don't stop the class to address that individual. Let them come in and have a seat and get themselves settled. There will eventually be a natural break in what you're doing to prepare your class, and at that time you'll be able to go over and introduce yourself, make sure that they're in the right classroom, tell them it's totally okay that they came in a couple minutes late, give them that pass, and then get going with the class. The other thing, the other instance that you'll have is people who come very late. At the franchise organization that I worked at, we had a great policy. It was if you were 30 minutes late for class, you didn't get in. And that was usually stopped right at the reception desk. But there were always a crafty few people that got past the receptionist and tried to make it into the class. If a person tries to come in 30 minutes late, what we would do is pull them aside, try and catch them as they were coming in, pull them outside of the classroom so that it was out of earshot from the students inside, and explain to them that the company policy was that if you were 30 minutes late to the class, you had to reschedule. And if you needed to, go down to the desk, make sure that the account executive who is responsible for that individual comes and takes care of that student so that you can go take care of yours. Right? Does that make sense? Is that what you guys do? No, not so much, right? People aren't late, right? People are never late. Say again? Because if a person's 30 minutes late for class, if I started my class on time, like I'm an Excel instructor, right? That's my bread and butter. Do you have any idea how much Excel I've gone through in 30 minutes? I'm not going to stop the entire classroom because somebody came in 30 minutes late and have them catch up. If I don't catch up that student, then what ends up going to happen is that they're constantly going to be behind. It's not fair to that student. It's not fair to the other students who might want to take responsibility for that person and then try and help them catch up. Now I've got that student behind and the student on either side of them behind because they're busy trying to help that person get up to speed. Does that make sense? Now I've got 3 people that are behind. Yes? That's a great question. Of course, I'm telling you this from the perspective of an apps instructor who usually teaches a 1-day class. If you are a technical instructor teaching a 5-day class, that's a completely different ballgame. I would say on day 1, if a person comes that late, yes, you're going to make sure that they come in because you're not going to get rid of $2,500 worth of revenue simply because they showed up 30 minutes late for class. But you're definitely going to have a conversation with that individual, right? Let them know that if they're coming in late, it makes it difficult for you, and you'd really appreciate it if they would help you out by coming in on time. And ask them, is there a conflict? Do you have to drop your kids off at school or something like that? Are you going to constantly be 30 minutes late? If that's the case and you're okay with that, then sure, no problem. Conversation increases understanding. So there's always extenuating circumstances. Even my 30-minute rule got broken a couple of times because the person was, important enough that we could let them slide past the 30-minute mark. Does that answer your question? Does that make more sense? There was another question over here. Did you have something for me? All right, great, thanks. All right. So, once you get all of your students in the classroom and you start your class, now comes your introduction. Everybody does their own introduction, right? Everybody does their own thing. However, I think there's a couple of things that you should consider adding to your introduction. I can tell you from personal experience that in New York City, people take frequent breaks at work. Some people have very bad attention deficit issues, right? They'll go 15 minutes of work and then they got to take a 20-minute break, right? The problem is that when you start a class, you've imprisoned them, and now they're anxious. And it doesn't matter what you say. You can be telling them the secrets of the universe in your introduction. All they want to know is when the first break is. All right? Make sure to include the break times in your introduction. Make it the first thing that you tell them, because then it'll put them at ease. They'll know, okay, it's going to be about 90 minutes before I can get my next cigarette and coffee in. Everything's going to be okay. I'm going to survive, right? And then they can listen to whatever it is that you've got to say. Agreed? The other thing is you want to make sure that you set expectations for the class. This is extremely important, especially in applications and also for technical people. There are a lot of people that come into these classes with very, very high expectations. Our desperate people, for example. They believe that this is going to be their silver bullet in order to get work again. And you have to be the one to break the news to them at this point, right at the beginning, that guess what, guys? I am not going to be able to make you a subject matter expert by the time this class is over. What I'm teaching you is a skill that must be practiced. Imagine me as a piano instructor and you've come to take lessons from me. At the end of lesson number 1, you are not going to be a concert pianist. At the end of lesson 2, you will not be a concert pianist. These things take time, and you have to give yourself time to receive the information I'm giving you and give yourself time to practice what you've learned. It's the only way you're going to become proficient and the only way that you're going to be able to pass a Microsoft exam. You have to be the one to give them that information, because otherwise, if they come in with very high expectations, it's going to be a very big letdown when it comes down to the last day of class. When they hit that survey, it's going to reflect if you didn't manage that expectation. All right? So, start the class. Now, there's a problem, especially in the United States. It's called hypersomnia. Let me read to you this little tidbit of information. Dr. Mark Mawald, a neurologist and director of the Minnesota Regional Sleep Disorders Center in Rochester, said in a recent issue of the journal Nature, quote, "There are nearly 100 identified sleep-wake disorders. Hypersomnia is one of these disorders. It's also known as sleep deprivation. It is likely that more than 100,000 car crashes occur annually in the U.S. due to driving while drowsy. The most common cause of hypersomnia is voluntary sleep deprivation done for social or economic reasons." Right? We don't know anything about that, right? No late night internet surfing sessions or late night study sessions. Yeah? The moment that you begin your class, it's a fight between you and the Z-monster. The Z-monster is going to try and put your student to sleep, and you're going to do everything you can to bring them back from the brink. Right? There are 3, and only 3 techniques that you can use to get your students to pay attention to what you're saying. Each one a little bit better than the other. We'll start with the best method. You need to get your students working. One of the best benefits of being an applications instructor is I can just launch the application, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, right? And get people on task. Get them working. You get hands working, you get the brain working, and you're going to keep sleep at bay. If that's not practical, especially in a technical class, you've got a little bit of lecturing that you have to do. Lecture, but make sure that you're telling a story. Tell the story in short bursts and ask questions. You want to make sure that the students are receiving the information that you're giving them and that they're comprehending and understanding. If they don't comprehend right away, you need to start getting your class, the people in your classroom, to argue with one another. Arguments are the best way to get emotions high, to get people to bounce ideas off of one another. It's a time-honored tradition in many schools. There are many types of schools. I'm trying to think of one example. Talmudic, the Orthodox Jews that study Talmud. They spend hours arguing over the tiniest little bits of information, but it's key to the way they learn. The only way to internalize something is to have open discussions and open arguments, right? Have open arguments in your class. Just don't let it get physical, all right? Cool. And, yes, make sure you don't go more than 90 minutes without a break. It's very, very difficult. There are many people who have chemical dependencies, nicotine, caffeine, sugar, fat, salt. They need these things in order to survive. If you go more than 90 minutes at a stretch, biologically, they are not going to be able to pay attention and they will fall asleep at their desk. Do your best to make your breaks at least at 90-minute intervals. All right. Now, if we followed all those techniques, that would be fine by itself, but we have to come back and deal with these people, the willing, the reluctant, and the desperate, right? You're going to have to figure out before your first break who's who, because at least one person in your classroom is going to disrupt your class, right? There's always one person behind, always one person that doesn't want to pay attention to what you're talking about and play on Facebook or play video games. And where does that person sit? If they came in late, they're sitting right in front of you, right? And their monitor is projecting what they're doing to everybody else in the class. So now nobody's paying attention to you. They're trying to find out the Facebook status of the person who's sitting in the front of the class. So what we need to do is at that first break, when you send people on their coffee and nicotine runs, anybody that you need to pull aside and make sure that you have a very quiet, very tender conversation with them. The people I like to deal with first are any of the desperate. A lot of the times I will get individuals in my classroom that don't know how to use a mouse or have bad keyboarding skills, or they skipped a level 1 class and went straight into a level 2 class, and they constantly have that look of panic on their face, like, you know that look, right? They'll be like that for the next hour, and there's nothing that you can do. You could spend all day one-on-one with them, and it still wouldn't matter. Their anxiety levels are way too high. Pull them aside. Hey, Jack, listen, I saw that you were having a little bit of trouble and you were struggling a little bit in class. Do we have you in the right class? Do you want to stay in this class? Can we get you into another class that might be a little bit more level 1, a little bit more your speed? Leave it up to the student. If the student wants to get out of that class, if they want to pull the ripcord and say, no, there's no way I'm going to be able to follow along, and if they want to leave, get together with your management and make sure that you transfer that student or reschedule them for a level 1 class or a simpler class another day. If they want to stay in the class, though, if they want to stick it out, you have to be clear with them. Hey, Jack, listen, you can stay in the class. However, I'm not going to be able to support you the whole way through the class because it's just not fair to the other students. Are you okay with that? And if they say yes, then you're good. All right, Jack, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have you sit in the class. I'm going to check on you from time to time just to make sure that you're in the right spot. But for the most part, this hands-on class is going to be like a lecture or an audit for you. Are you going to be okay with that? If Jack says yes, then you're golden. Because now Jack can sit in the class quietly and you don't have to manage that individual too much, right? You just check on them, make sure that they're okay. Hey Jack, you okay? You're on the right page? All right, fantastic. Keep checking in with them. Don't ignore them. They stuck it out. You got to have some respect for that. So that's the desperate. That's your desperate student. The other student that you're going to need to take care of is your reluctant student, the one that's kind of disrupting things. Catch those individuals on the way back into class. Hey, Mary Jane, can I talk to you for a second? Listen, I saw that you weren't really following along with what was going on. I just wanted to make sure, is everything okay? You know, are you here because you want to be here, or are you being forced to be in this class? If you deal with it tenderly, and if you deal with it, you know, in a very discreet way, a lot of the times these students will instantly open up to you. Oh, Seth, you have no idea. They have this new security policy at work. They're making me take this class, and I already know this stuff. I apologize if I'm disruptive, but this stuff is just, you know, you'll see their frustration, say, listen, Mary Jane, don't worry about it. How about this? Let's put you in the back of the class. You can do whatever it is that you want to do back there. At the end of the class, we'll give you your certificate of completion and you'll finish the class. Does that sound fair? This may sound shocking to all of you, right, that stuff like this goes on. However, guess what? You can't make people learn anything. People are going to do whatever it is that they're going to do in your class. If you contain them, if you put them in their own corner, if you're complicit with them, everything's going to be okay. Now that person is not going to poison the rest of your class. They're on your side. And now you can move forward with your class in a positive way. You've just made a connection with your desperate student. You've also just made a connection with your reluctant student, right? And now you're all big one happy family. So you're going to go through your class, and now we're going to come up on Q&A. There are going to be some individuals that will have the courage to raise their hand and ask you a question. This always makes me smile, because it means that I've developed enough comfort and trust in the classroom that a person decided that they're going to risk embarrassing themselves in front of a bunch of strangers asking what they may believe to be the dumbest question on the planet. You have to respect this question, even if it is the dumbest question on the planet. You have to respect it, and you have to treat it as if it's the smartest thing that person ever said. The best thing to do is when a person asks a question, the first thing you want to do is, that's a fantastic question. Thank you very much for asking that, right? Then go ahead and answer the question, and then say, thank you so much again for asking that. I really appreciate it. You want to make sure that a person feels comfortable asking questions in class. Now, what if somebody asks you something about your class that is in your lesson, but it was like 20 minutes ago? Hey, thanks for asking that. You know what? That ties into what we talked about a few minutes ago, where we did X, Y, Z. Do you remember that? We did X, Y, Z, and then A, B, C, and this is what the result that we got. So, yeah, thank you very much for that, right? So these are people that are hiccuping in the brain. They went into the Wayback Machine, and they're pulling stuff from 20 minutes ago. Now, what about people that are looking to the future, right? They're asking a question that you're going to talk about a little bit later on. Hey, Mary, thank you so much for asking that question. You know what? We're actually going to cover that a little bit later in Lesson 6. If you want, let me write down your question, and when we hit Lesson 6, remind me that you asked this question, and we'll address it at that time. Right? Yeah. A correcting question. How do you deal with like a person who asks you a question and you want to... Sure. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So the statement that the gentleman was making was that if somebody asks you a question and it's not exactly congruent with what you're teaching, or maybe it was a malformed question, to take it and transform it and make the student feel special because they were on the right track, right? What I like to do, especially if it's a question that somebody asks and I have to answer it negatively, is you sandwich the negative answer between two compliments. Wow, Jack, that was a really, really creative thought process, right? But I think that if you follow it to its eventual conclusion, you'll find that it might not work in this particular situation, but I love where your head was at, right? Right. There are a lot of very fragile egos that we have to tend to, especially in the US, because you have no idea who's sitting in the classroom. It could be the CEO of the company, right? So you always want to make sure that if you're delivering a negative answer to a question, sandwich it between two compliments. Yes, sir. I agree. I agree. I agree. Absolutely. This, again, this is teaching from a perspective from New York City, right? And the surrounding tri-state area. So yeah, culturally, this is not something that that would be accepted everywhere. I agree with you 110%. I like where your head is at. Right? See how that worked? You see how that worked? Yeah, exactly. Sure. I'd love to. But it works for me because I'm the guy from New York City, right? And I get a little extra leeway because I'm from over there. You know, if I was a native and I was trying to do that, no one would ever let me get away with it, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I'm from New York, it's cute. Here he goes. See? Sure. They need that positive reinforcement, especially young students. Young students are a very special case, and you have to give that positivity back to them because especially females, there are a lot of charitable organizations that I work with that help young women get introduced to technology. And one of the things that you always have to do is constantly make sure that you're not bruising their self-worth or their ego, because they're always told that they can't do things. You know, girls shouldn't be doing math, girls shouldn't be doing engineering, and you have to really tread lightly, especially with younger students that are up and coming. Do you agree with that statement? Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Cool. So, the last thing that I have here on the Q&A is remember that you don't have all the answers. Don't ever let standing in front of the podium make you believe that you know everything. You're going to get asked a question that you don't know. And the way that I've always approached it is always admit, hey, Jack, you know what? That's a phenomenal question. I have no idea what the answer is. If you have time, say, let's find out the answer together, right? You go over to your computer and you show your student how professionals find answers, right? You go to Bing, right? And you do a search, right? And if you can't find it underneath the sponsored results, guess what? You say, listen, it's clearly a more complicated issue than we first thought it was going to be. I'll tell you what, let me get together with some of my colleagues and let me find out the answer for you. I promise you I will have the answer by the end of the day. Make sure you follow up on that, because the student is now trusting you to find the answer to their question. And when you do find out what the answer is, make sure that you let them know how you arrived at that answer. You want these people to be more self-sufficient, right? Good. The last thing is, when you do your storytelling and you're asking questions of students, if you asked a question and you want a response from your students, wait 9 seconds. 9 seconds. Because it's the same technique we use for toddlers. There are young children who, when you ask them questions, they're not used to critical thinking. Well, guess what? The same applies to American business people. They're not used to critical thinking. They go through mechanical motions at work, right? They're not used to being asked critical questions. So when you stun them with a question in a classroom, you need to let it sink in their head and let them process it. You will be shocked that there will be complete silence for 8 seconds, and then on the 9th second, people will jump in and say, oh yeah, you know what, I know the answer to that. Again, that's Europe. That's Europe for you. You guys are quick. Listen, don't get me wrong. You know, we have our fair share of knowledgeable people in the United States, but when it comes to new knowledge, right? It's not like a pub trivia game. When you're feeding knowledge to your students, they don't even know that they've received that knowledge. The only way you can verify it is by asking those critical questions. You have to give them time to process that short-term memory so that they can see, hey, yeah, you know what? I do remember that from 20 minutes ago, even though I was kind of half asleep. You know, you did mention that. And then they'll regurgitate that answer for you. And that's how you know that your storytelling is going to be effective. All right, last couple of slides. When it comes time to wrap up your class, you need to do your closing remarks. You also need to decide whether or not you're going to give your students contact information. Do you folks give contact information to your students? Say again? Yeah, but you also have to be careful, because depending on the crowd, I've given my contact information to individuals when I was a young instructor. I would give contact. If you have any questions or concerns, please give me a call, right? And people would send me their work with a deadline, right? And then I'd have to send them a bill, right? You have to make sure that you qualify the giving out of your material. Hey, listen, contact me if you need to, but make sure that it's only related to class-specific information. I can't answer questions for you. That requires a consultative rate. But please, let me know how things are working out for you and keep in touch, right? The other thing that you have to do is sell the next class. Whether you work for yourself or if you work for CPLS, you want to make sure that you say, hey, listen, if you really enjoyed this class, you should take level 3. I'm teaching it on this date, and this date. When you sell the class to a student, or you put the seed in their mind to take the class, not only is it going to be good for you, because when the person asks for the class, they're going to be asking specifically for your class, you're also putting yourself, giving yourself a little bit of job security. You want to make sure people return back to training so that you have other training engagements to actually teach. When it comes time for the survey, make sure that you point to the survey link on your screen. Make sure that everybody has their survey link up on their computers. And explain to them the survey, just the basics. This is the survey. It's a score from 1 to 9. 1 is the worst, and 9 is the best, right? I hope I've earned your highest scores today. Thank you very much. When you're done with the survey, please take your stuff and meet me outside. Leave the room. You do not need to be standing over them and judging them while they're entering in survey scores. Leave the room, get certificates of completion if that's something that your center does, and then wait for the student to come out after they finished. Give them the handshake, the big smile. Thank you very much for coming to class. Here's your certificate. And that's where the student is going to also address any final concerns that they have and ask you any post-class questions. Once you get rid of all your students, you need to do your post-class cleanup. You need to make sure that everything's straightened up. You don't want it to look like a mess for the next instructor. Follow any protocols that your IT department have. Shut down computers, shut down monitors if that's something that they want you to do. You know, turn off your projector and stuff like that. And then go home and study, because there's always more to learn, right? You got to stay current on your certifications. And then wake up, and the very next day, get back at it. I won't repeat that. In the foot, right. Once again, I really would like to thank our partner sponsors. And as promised, I will give you my contact information. My information is SethCrespo@live.com. Please do not send me your work with a deadline. I really do appreciate any comments and also any tidbits of knowledge, things that you do here in Europe that's different than mine, differences of opinion. Please contact me. You can also search for me on LinkedIn. I really would like to connect with most of you here. Not all of you, but most of you. All right. Thank you very much. This has been Dynamic Delivery. My name is Seth Crespo. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you. Thank you so much.